Welcome to Wickerson Studios. I thought I'd take a little break here and show a little history of the place and how we got started 10 years ago. This month was when I first summer I'd moved in, or spring, late spring, and then what I'd put in Hamlet's Mill. So let's jump into it. You can go to Blurb and you can take a look at the book. It's been out and publicized and sold and printed for 10 years. I thought you might find it interesting. So basically, here it is. Let me get rid of that thing. I guess it would disappear. And that was the cover. That was a bronze cupola cart that I'd made and sent off for a show in Holland at the time. And that's how we kind of got started. That's what we were wrapping it up before we bought the land. Uh, there's a little bit of text in here. Authenticity has become a key word in my life and reflects my ability to positively affect the existing world around me. This is the old foundry and a pretty huge mold up the side, and I believe that's Aaron Schmidt walking in the background. Pretty huge workshop that we pulled together, worked out on my land, had a visiting artist in the Kansas City Art Institute's old foundry setup, which was pretty fun going on at the time. This was the land when I started, so Wickerson Studio stands in the wake of my first 10-year sabbatical, and I definitely got started to see what would happen. I just basically started with an iron pour on my land with Aaron Schmidt and saw what would happen. I did do my first digital work in 2010 while I was visiting friend Eric Mielenbelt at Naked Architecture in Holland, and I did that in SketchUp and exported and imported that to my land. I think I have an image of that. And I had made with my father gang molds and had 400 pre-made Adobe Ram bricks with about 3%, 6% concrete in them. That was the clay that was on the land. And literally did this with a shovel after the bricks were made in about a month. There's one of the arches that went around the original version of Hamlet's Mill. When I moved in, there wasn't a gravel road around, and that's where I spent my money in the fall before I thought I'd have to bring in some heavy equipment, which I ended up not doing. I actually did a lot of it by hand with the materials on site. This is Ash Anders, was one of my first uh, collaborators, and they were in their fourth year at the Kansas City Art Institute, and they found some trees which I believe John Northington cut down in the front yard, and the ants had done the work on them and left us these wonderful arches. So Ash had brought those in as a piece. This is its drying it, the interior of it. After the first month of kind of building it, inspired by a lot of the casting work and certainly the writing of Vannaccio Biringuccio. There's nickel plates that have been run up on both sides of this door, I think, at the time, or maybe I hadn't even installed them yet. Maybe those are just bricks. But I did reinforce that with a couple of castings. It was a rain guard that was put up on top of it. You see where I dried the rest of the bricks, and I fully intended to close it, but it structurally wasn't going to work. And here's the paper vellum windows that went over top of the windows on the inside. I kind of convinced Ash to work on that a little bit, and we did a bit of a rain guard on the inside, made some steps, and I think a bread oven ended up going in it by Palmer Conroy. There's another iron pour off to the side, which was the beginnings of where Hamlet's Mill would be made a few years later. Moby Dick, which was an Onagama kiln, would be made a few years later. And you can see a collection of things around the side, cast irons, aluminum, little gantry being installed where the barn used to be. Not uncommon to be out there casting quite a bit. Oscar was 1 year old, so started getting into it. I traveled a little bit, so I went down and was part of a atelier in Germany, in Prenzlauer district, and I did with a little aluminum pour out of some clay and whatever I could find in an old shop, and did a little bit of aluminum casting there. And then I also was working a little bit in Holland with the people I'd end up meeting. When I came home, the Shawnee Mission School District and a good group, about 5 students from the Kansas City Art Institute, started a casting club, and we did a lot of activities out on our land. Got Shane Yazowski here, Stephanie Sterling. I think we got Ash Anders around there somewhere, John Northington. Rosie Reardon was the high school teacher that really made this all happen. Pretty fantastic. Ash Anders did a casting piece, and we intended to fill it with iron. Ran out of iron in the process, and there are a few student names of people that definitely helped pull things together for me. Bobby Zokates came out and did his Man of War piece. He did that at KCAI, installed it on my land, had to buy a generator and a welder out there, and we put that up for that first winter. And that was kind of the end of the first year. I also brought home one of the biggest pieces and last pieces I made on the sculpture pad at the Kansas City Art Institute, and really turned my studio from KCAI back into where it needed to be, inspired by the Glockenstollens that I saw in northern Holland while I was visiting and traveling there quite often with my wife, and Oscar even made a trip. and Beth made it with Max, but she was pregnant with Max. This is the winter as we go into it. You see the nickel plates, the kilns on the inside, the snow cover, and it became kind of a home for the wildlife on my property. There's a couple of iron plates that were kind of reinforcing the wall, certainly some wheels that were made, the paper, the sun kind of keeping track of the calendar of events, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And then I had a full ventral hernia surgery, so I had really pulled myself to pieces doing this by shovel. I had to go in and get a flange implanted, and we're at the 10-year mark now, and I hope I don't have to go back in for any future surgery on it. So that was kind of a slowdown, and even though I was on painkillers, I kind of started pretty quickly again once we hit February and things started to warm up again. Yeah, it was a nice quote by Hesiod. Do not stall until tomorrow, and the next day a man who puts off his work always wrestles with disaster. So there's the land as it was kind of transformed. There's the raptor of turkeys. Turkeys all came in, and Bobby Zokite's man of war sitting in the foreground. And that was going into the first, I guess the second winter, but the first winter where the barn was gone and gravel road was in, and I built a structure. A couple of small items that were made at the Shawnee Mission School District with those casting workshops. Pretty cool lost wax and bronze casting processes that I'd end up using. Second structure was the Grieve Foundry, which was inspired by a sod kind of structure my grandmother had lived in, so her name kind of went on it. The cast iron bell that I made for her and her date of birth. She was still alive at the time. This was my grandmother I left Canada with, still alive, and I've never been able to return. She did pass away a few years ago, but we built a sod house, and there's Max or Oscar walking in the foreground. And really just lifted things up with block and tackle and used the chainsaw and dragged everything by automotive and rope and block and tackle and pulley. There's the inside of the Grieve Foundry. After it was sawed, I brought in the furnaces that were traditionally from Livers bronze, never hooked up a KCAI, reinstalled them, and ran these off a very interesting process of Kingsford charcoal and air. So I thought that was a cool process to get some bronze aluminum out of it. A few little odd objects here. I think Lee Griggs had made those little bronzes, if I recall it. Everything has its life. There's me kind of, it reminds me of Hieronymus Bosch kind of futility of doing things when I'm putting up a little flagpole. It probably was the Newfoundland flag. We're at the 7-minute mark. Here's a little Kupelkart wagon. I sent that on to, I believe, Eric Muhlenbelt in Holland as a gift. Did a lot of exchanges with him and his kids and kind of got a foothold into Europe through my friends and relationships that I had. Mainly happened because of a good friend, Yarrick, that moved off with his wife and had a child there and then had a second child as well. She's since grown up, and I think she's around 18 right now, so times have changed. Here's another cupola, a cart wagon made in bronze, and it's a piece that I sent off, I think, at a later date. It might have actually went off to the Holland show in 2008. And there's the Grieve Foundry, and kind of inspired by it, and I installed that, put that on Google Earth, and they were the two plans that I didn't sketch up. Funny to think back to those things when I was working on, and then coming full circle back to digital means through kind of parametric design for Grasshopper for Rhino. So it's always been there. Here's the Grieve Foundry in one of its iterations. I did have to tear down the walls and redo them. The sod did not last compared to some of the adobe structures and ram brick and silver ram brick structures. The door was cool. These boiler doors came off the Kansas City Art Institute basement boiler that we hauled out by hand and salvaged all the iron. I just thought the doors were too nice. I still have them. They have Irish clovers on them that say Ideal still in the back. And then I intended to do a few projects with Eric, but he's done his own. And we ended up doing a pretty cool project called Fire Over Kansas in 2013. But there was really a nice exchange, and he's still helping me out with school. And over this, he's actually going to be jurying the hay bale structure that I'm offering for people to submit by June 15th. So thanks to him and a good relationship, I built him. And then I think, Yarrick's in there as well. Yarrick's definitely done all my photography. There's just some shows that got started back in 1995, the PKO Gallery, and culminated through, I guess, until the Meg had left in maybe 2000 when I'd move off to Newfoundland for my first teaching position after grad school. And there's Ice Tools, which was my thesis show, plumb bob wheelbarrows, block and tackles, and shovels and pitchettes. Just a lot of ice parts made for that show. And thesis paper. A little ending, a little summary of what was going on, what I hope to do at the end of the 2010 season. Photo credits went out to Yarrick and his wife at the time. And there's Feather, a portrait I did, I guess, in 2012 when I headed back for one of the last trips, even though I've made it back a few other times on my own, but it was a kind of family trip to do that one. Anyhow, exciting. I thought I'd do a little overview of that in 10 minutes. Thanks for watching. Let's see where we go with grasshopper for rhino, the ABCs, one, two, threes.